Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats, a weekly podcast featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon. I'm the host of the podcast. Today, I'm talking with Rayvon Carter, a double degree recipient with a journalism degree in 2013 and then a master's in English in 2015. Rayvon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. How are you doing?
Oh, great. And it is our pleasure. You know, we have a big picture of you on the third floor of Salee Hall. And if I think back, you were probably involved. Didn't you take a class where you're involved with the newscast?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did. It was yes, I did take one of those classes. I was always
TV
in that
graphics?
building. Yes, that's the one. I was always, and I feel like I was always in the department, of course, but then like seeing that photo come up, I didn't know when it was going up. I knew that it was eventually going up. And I also didn't know it was going to be as big as it was. And like everyone started like snapping me and like tweeting me. And like, I was like, wow, okay. I remember like one of my former professors, she's like, there's so many people stopping like in front of this photo, and I'm seeing people all day like taking pictures of this photo and like taking pictures in front of this photo. I'm like,
so I feel like I've known you, but I haven't known you very well. So I'd see your picture every morning when I would go to work. So it's so good to actually talk with you.
Likewise. Thank you. I really do appreciate you having me on. I'm always excited to, talk in these type of forums and, just recall fond memories at
Good.
Western.
Well, let's give everybody a life update. What's going on in your life? Where are you at? What's going on?
So right now I'm in Illinois. I've been working from home for the pandemic, as I'm sure is the case for a lot of people. It's not the case for a lot of people, but a lot of people can attest to the fact that they've been able to work from home, which has been pretty nice. I've been able to have a bit more of a flexible schedule, if you will. And yeah, it's just giving me more of a command over my own time. So I feel more like a project manager these days, in addition to like a writer, because now I have to be more responsible with like making sure that I'm allocating the right amount of time on like different projects and such. So yeah, I'm cool on it in Illinois, and just trying to like make sure I maintain some sort of a social life. I think during these times, it's really hard, especially when everyone is being like very cautious and rightfully so. But like it could become very like somber, like being in the house, all the time. And then when your workplace is now your place of relaxation as well, it's like, how do you separate the two? So just being cognizant of that, and continuing to pick up new hobbies, has been something that I've been getting into as of late as well.
Rayvon, did I see that you received the title of senior writer at Apple? Is that right?
Yes. So I was recently promoted. Thank God. I've been at Apple for almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in January. And I was recently promoted. So essentially, when I talked to my manager about it, I was like, well, what does this mean? It's like, keep doing exactly what you're doing, but more. I was just like, I could do that. But yeah, as a senior writer, that's one of the things that has been on my goals, on my list of goals for a while now. So to be able to scratch that off, it's like, okay, on to the next one. Like, I think I celebrated it for probably like 2 days, like the weekend after that. And then after that, I was just kind of like, okay, like what's my next goal? I'm like, how can I push the needle a bit further? And it's normally like that for me, at least. Like I'm always just like super excited and super zeroed in on like one particular goal. And then like once I get it, I celebrate it. I acknowledge the fact that I've worked for this. I didn't always have that. And then boom, I'm like on to the next thing. So yeah, I was very happy for that. So I've kind of just been doing exactly what I've been doing. So as a writer, how can I say this? So like my term, I used to tell people I was a copywriter, and that used to confuse people because they were like, oh, you do like legal term, you do like trademarking and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, not like copyright law. That's like a very different thing. That's like beyond, my jurisdiction. I write marketing copy for advertising brands and professionals and the like. And then I just shortened it. The older I'm getting, the more accomplished I'm becoming in my career field, the simpler I'm becoming. So I'm just like, I don't need to even say copywriter. I'm a writer, because I don't want to limit myself to just saying like, oh, I only do advertising writing. I also do like a variety of other types of writing as well. So as a senior writer, I get to touch a lot of different things on my team. So I could be doing like a film, like commercials. I've done that while I've been at Apple, but then I've also done like holiday cards, but then I've also done like out of home billboards, but then I've also done like naming of like conference rooms. It's like, it really just, you can just be doing like a variety of just like different types of writing. So it really just depends on like the opportunity, the time. The timing is like the big thing. I'll say that first, the time, and then the opportunity. And then just, following through it and making sure it doesn't conflict with like any of the other projects that may be coming down the pipeline.
Well, I'm wondering only because everybody's going to see this young face and say, how is that person a senior anything? Because he's so young.
Yeah.
No, that's well, we celebrate that.
I appreciate that. Yes, oh my goodness. Like it was, I guess trial by fire would be like an appropriate phrase if I'm using it right. If I'm not, we'll just check that up to the deuces. But it surprises me as well, to be honest with you. When I was at Western, I'll say this, when I was at Western, I didn't think that I would be at Apple. And it wasn't because I didn't think that I was smart enough or that I didn't have, what it took. It just wasn't something people were talking about. No one was talking about like these huge brands in Silicon Valley as like something that is like a tangible thing that I could aspire to. Mm-hmm. So to have the opportunity, it was like a series of small opportunities that led to that opportunity. And oddly enough, like the journey was very unexpected, so to speak. So I graduated, as you mentioned earlier, with a bachelor's in journalism. And because I wanted to own my own magazine at the time. And I was like, I'm going to start a magazine and it's going to be geared toward these people. And this is what it's going to talk about. And this is how frequently it's going to come out. And then I graduated and I was just kind of like, print journalism isn't really as popular as it was. Right. And how sustainable will this be for me long term? Even if I am able to be successful with it now, I started to question as the days kept getting closer to graduation. I'm like, what am I going to do if this does not, am I comfortable with like betting on this for, the foreseeable future? And the answer was no, unfortunately. So I started to think of ways that I could kind of leverage my journalism expertise in another field. So then I was just like, I graduated with a minor in English. What if I studied English and a master's program? And why don't I just stay at Western to do that? And that'll give me more time to like figure out what it is that I actually want to do. And like English is a bit more broad so that I'll be able to use that in addition to the journalism degree to hopefully find something that I really like. I did not know what it was at that time. And then I did my first internship, my first like advertising internship, I'll say, after I got my master's, which I felt right. The summer after I got my master's is when I did my first like professional internship. And I thought I was so late to the game then. I was just like, who does an internship at this point? Like I should be like accepting an offer. You're seeing all these people on Facebook and like Twitter, and everyone's like, all these people I was graduating with are just like, oh, I just accepted this offer, or I'm going to this university, or I'm doing here. And it was just like, I didn't really have anything lined up after that. So I took this internship, which then led to another internship, so that internship that I did was called the Marcus Graham Project. And it was in Dallas, Texas. And I did that for the summer. And because of that internship, I was able to go to this program called the Ag Color Futures Program, which was in Boca Raton, Florida. And then I met a recruiter at the reception for that like marketing weekend, if you will, for young professionals that ended up telling me about a residency program. And then that is what ultimately led me to Apple. And then I was hired out of that program. So it was three different programs spread across 3 years that led me to Apple. And I've been there ever since.
It reminds me, Rayvon, of how some people are wave breakers. And that's what I call them, the people that are the ones that forge a new way. And it seems like you maybe you're just always, that's your destiny, is always to be the person that breaks the waves, to be the one that creates the path through and a new path for others to follow.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. It took a while to receive that, or I guess notice that, because you get to a point where you're like, why is everything so difficult? Like, why? I just feel like I'm always chartering new territory. I'm always like having to like do this, and that's very difficult. You have to like, come against like stereotypes, like unconscious bias. You're just up against all this stuff, like imposter syndrome, all these things, and rarely are there people who have done the same thing, and they're like, oh, I could like tell you how to like, move this way or move this way. So it's all trial and error. My whole career up to this point has been trial and error and like a game of pitch and toss.
Yeah, but perseverance builds character.
Yes, that it does.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your beginnings, because you grew up in Chicago.
Yes.
And let's talk about some of the things that you feel, family, environment, whatever it may be, that maybe has influenced you both personally and professionally.
Yeah, for sure. So I come from a very big family, and my entire family, my family is filled with creatives of all sorts, like musicians, advertising professionals, like singers, DJs, artists, like just all of these things, all of these different aspects of like creativity. So I've always like been, I guess, in the mix with it. My mom is an advertising professional with like a very vast experience. Like I'm not even going to say how long, and fear of like putting her age. Like it's just like she has a very vast experience. So I remember like seeing her work on like commercials for like their top clients at the time, and going from like agency to agency in the downtown Chicago area, and realizing like, oh, this is something that looks like interesting, that looks pretty fun. I didn't really know exactly what it is that she did at the time, but I knew like the world that she was like kind of operating in, which was useful when I decided like, oh, this might be something that I want to do as well, now that I'm not doing this like print journalism thing. So my family is very much so one of like my biggest influences, just as a collective, because they're just filled with creatives, and that's all we do. Like we don't have a lot of like doctors. I always joke and say we don't have like a lot of doctors or like lawyers or like things like that, but we have like a lot of like creatives. Yeah,
that's a good. That's it. And the fact that you felt that would be something that would be celebrated and encouraged and supported by your family. That's good to know.
Yes.
I think that makes a big difference when a young person feels like what I want to do, what I'm good at, you're going to be okay with.
Yeah, that's super true. And it's just like, I didn't know that a lot of families did not condone like creative fields. I saw that type of stuff on TV. Like, the parents are just like, this isn't our real job, or like, you can't do this and we're not paying for that. And I used to think like, where are they getting this from? But, art does imitate life in more ways than one. And as I got older, I realized that a lot of people didn't have that same support to pursue specific types of fields. And while I understand, like I'm empathetic to the fact that I feel like in most cases, the parents who are like doubling down on saying like, you can't do these type of fields, it's really coming from a place of concern. Like they want their kids to be able to be better than them. And, it is, I'm fortunate enough to be on like the client side of like this industry, but like I have a lot of friends who are on, the agency side, which means that they kind of like, everything that they do revolves around clients. So like if you're on that side, it can be very daunting to not know if you're going to have like job security. I know people who've been laid off like 7, 8, 9 times, because it just comes down to, if the client is not pleased with the agency and they find another agency, the agency can no longer afford to keep any of the people who are working on said client. So I get it in that sense, but at the same time, I think it causes people far too often to kind of like minimize who they are, and they ultimately end up doing well at something else. But I also believe that just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you should be doing it. So it's important for us to like make sure that we're staying true to ourselves and like what we think it is that we're called to do, not just in an area where we can have impact, but in an area where we can have impact doing something that is tied intrinsically to like our purpose. So yeah.
Yeah. Did you, in high school, did you find that you had some writing abilities and some creative, that was a way to get out some of that creative energy?
Yes, it was for sure. Like I was very involved in high school. I went to Proviso West High School, and I was on the school paper. I was in the marching band. I was on the student council. I was like on the track team for a short time. I was like doing everything. Like, and being able to write for the school paper, I took a lot of pride in that. I was very excited to see. That was probably like my first professional clip, so to speak. Like being able to see, and I think it only came out like once a week or like once every other week, probably. But I was very excited to be able to like get an assignment from like our advisor and then have to go to like one of the sporting events at the school that I was going to be at anyway, because I was in the marching band. So it was like being able to like take off my instrument and then like just start like writing or like recording the event while I'm also like playing at the event, so that I can go and like take notes on what happened and do this write up. I really enjoyed that. And it wasn't until I got to Western though that I realized that I could get paid for that. And that was because my first job, and the only job that my first job at Western was at the Writing Center. I came, I did the interview, I got the job, and I kept the job throughout the rest of my tenure at Western. And I thought I was only going to be there. I was like, every now and then I was just like, oh, I'm tired of this job. It's boring. Oh, I'm tired of like helping people like write. I'm going to go work at the CAF, or I'm going to go work somewhere else. And I realized that like that was like a top tier job on campus. Yeah. Like it was like I was indoors. I could sit down. I was in the library or like in one of the other like satellite centers. And I took that for granted sometimes, but I'm glad that I did not leave that job, because that I didn't realize it at the moment, but that was also making me a better writer, helping people with like all their writing assignments and things like that. Ultimately helped me become more efficient in my own craft, because I was helping people. I was like a junior, helping people. I remember I had one client, it was for like their thesis for their master's. And then there was like someone else who came in and they were in the doctoral program. And I was just like, oh, I guess writing is just like, I must be good at this. If they are trusting me with their academic voice and they're coming to me and they're like, what do you think? And what do you want to do about this? And I'm like, well, this is your paper. So what do you want to do? I can help you like, get
I know what I would do.
Right. So yeah, I think it was during that time that I was like, it started at Proviso West for sure, but I think it was kind of like taken to new heights when I got to Western. Like you could really, lean into this, and you should start, like looking into ways in which you can make this into a career.
Let's talk about some of the ways you're able to branch out socially while you're at WIU. You were in a fraternity.
Yes. Alpha Pi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Eta chapter. I was very involved with them, still very involved with them. I have a meeting with them later today, like like the alumni committee. But
I want young people to understand that that's something that will impact you for the rest of your life, right?
Yes, hands down. Like I mean, honestly, I learned so much about myself in terms of like how I handle conflict. Not just like the leadership aspect of it, right? I think that's the part that we sell, right? Like, oh, you could be like a brother, and like we have these leadership positions on campus, and like we have these grades and all this stuff, which is great. I think that's one part of it, but like I also learned a lot in terms of like how to handle conflict, because you're dealing with a lot of students who are all in more ways than one very strong-minded and have a very specific, outlook on life and how they think things should go. And, it was very difficult sometimes to have to get all of us on the same page because we were representing one brand on the campus. So it was like, eventually it became easy because you are what you repeatedly do. And it became easy. And I'm thankful for that experience because that's something that transferred over into my professional life. And I'm able to use some of those conflict resolution skills and like, setting and sending invites out for events and like working with like the administrators on campus to like make sure that like all of the spaces and things are booked. Like all of that stuff is invaluable in like the real world, I feel like, because it may not be, yes, I'm not doing a fraternity party or like a fraternity informational, but I'm doing like events in which those skill sets that I needed to successfully pull those off are still relevant today. So I was very involved with that chapter. I was the vice president for about 2 years, maybe. But I was just, fraternities in college, whether that's Western or not, run like, I call them like small nonprofits. Like everybody does everything. Like you got a title, but everybody's doing everything. And it's just like, you're doing what needs to be done at the time. So it was very much so like a nonprofit. I've learned.
And you are also involved with the Black Student Association?
Yes. So I was the senator for the Black Student Association first. And then the following year I was very ambitious and ran for BSA president and SGA vice president at the same time. And that was a very stressful time, but I won both. I'm happy to report that I did win both, but it was very stressful because a lot of people, I guess the talk became like, how is this kid going to do both of these things? Like how these are like two of the largest like governing bodies as relates to students on campus. And, what if it becomes like a monopoly or like one student has too much like influence and like all of these things I was like up against. And it was tough, like convincing people like, I'm not going to be like, saying things in SGA that I know would benefit BSA, or I'm not going to be giving like BSA like insider knowledge of things that are happening with SGA. And I think that the more people I got to speak to authentically, like outside of like the platform or like, the heritage room or the grand ballroom, the more people were like, oh, okay, he seems legit. I believe him. So it worked out. It was great. I think I spent more time. The campaigning of it all was the most tiring, probably. But actually doing it and carrying out the duties and the responsibilities was the easy part to me, because I, from the beginning, just wanted to make sure I made good on the promise that I made to the students. So, yeah.
I really like that you also mentioned some of the people that helped you along the way, like Belinda Carr, Earl Bracey.
Yes. Yes.
Can you talk about how? Yeah.
I don't know where I would be without these people. First of all, Miss Carr was one of the first people I met. I met her at a Black alumni picnic the summer before I was actually a student at Western. I came up to her and I was like, hi, I was told that I should like speak to you. And she said, oh, why were you told that? And I said, well, it's because I'll be transferring to Western in the fall. And she said, do you want to get involved? I said, I want to be very involved. I want to do everything. And she was just like, okay, we'll see. And I came and I met her. And my first semester, I said, you remember me from the summer? And she said, I do remember you. It's nice to see you. And I was like, what can I do? Where can I sign up? So she was very instrumental. I ended up becoming like a grad advisor for her, like later in life when I got in grad school. I was one of her like GAs for a year. But she gave me so much good advice. She gave me so much good like just life nuggets. She is a really good cook as well. So that was like an added bonus of like being able to have like snacks and like food meals like all the time. But she really did teach me a lot about like leadership. When I was like president in particular, I would have one-on-ones with her and she would tell me from an advisory perspective, like how I did with like addressing the general public, or like things that I could have said differently, and speaking with empathy, and not talking at people. Like those are a lot of things that she kind of like helped me cultivate as related to like my speaking voice as a leader. Because sometimes you say things up here that sound good, and then they get released, and you're like, that didn't sound like I thought it was going to sound.
Yeah.
I apologize. So she was really good with that. And Dr. Bracy was kind of like the same way. Like he was very like always there when I needed help with something. I would always go to him because he just seemed like he always had so much wisdom. And I'm just like, what do you think about this? And like, should I take this class? So it was stuff from like life stuff to like, I have a balance. I don't know if I'm going to be able to come back. I'm trying to figure out like what I need to do, to like school stuff, to, should I take this class? Should I be dropping this class? Should I take this over the summer? Like, what should I be doing? And when I think about like my experience at Western, those are like two people hands down. And then an honorable mention as well, I would say my professor, Teresa Simmons, who was one of my favorite instructors, hands down. And she was just such a great teacher. And I think that she had a really good way of taking things that otherwise would have been very complex and making them interesting. And I took every class of hers that I could, like as it relates to like advertising. I took every class that I could because she was just so good and very practical, and it felt very real. And then I found out that she like worked in agency before she was a teacher, and I'm like, this makes sense because you did this, and you're like, you could just tell like from her the way that she taught that she was very passionate about that. And yeah, so I still keep in contact with her. I was very sad when I found out that she was like retiring, and but I made sure to like do my job with like come in and speak to the class, her classes whenever I had the opportunity when I was in town for like homecoming or whatever. And I also worked to like create a pipeline for her students so that they'd be more aware of like some of the opportunities that I had that I took advantage of to get me where I'm at. So like I would, when those applications came out, I would like make sure she had them, and I would make sure that she knew all of the like deadline information, and that she could like let her students know. And if there were like any star students or students that she felt like very optimistic about, or like saw a lot of like potential as it relates to like what it takes to like really be successful in this field, I would always tell her like, you can give them my email, it's fine, I'm happy to like answer any questions that they may have, set up a like virtual situation. And yeah, so that she's those three people hands down. I'm always just like, yeah. And that's not to say that there weren't other people,
Yeah.
Because of course it takes a village, and I'm very incredibly thankful for like everyone in small or big ways who like played a role in like my development as I was like going through at Western, because I was really just trying to figure everything out. I still am, but at that moment I was just like trying to figure out other things. Now I'm trying to figure out bigger things, right?
Yeah.
But this is like
No, that's awesome. I think that's just so terrific that what you said about them. Rayvon, you already talked about a little bit about how you got into this position. I'm sure that there are challenges to your job. You want to talk a little bit about the joys and the challenges that you have to do?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, like, I'll start with the challenges first. I always like to just go in there. So I feel that as a writer, just in general, whether you're working for Apple, whether you're working for a nonprofit, wherever you're working as a writer, the hardest thing is taking on the voice and agency of someone other than yourself. So it's incredibly difficult to do that. It takes like I am my best as a writer when I'm at my best as a receiver of other people's creativity. So it's like I'm always going to the movies. I'm always like reading, and not just reading any books, but reading different types of books, like self-help books versus like books from like other writers versus like books that are just like fiction, like have nothing to do with like I'm always just trying to like stay on top of it. Like I have like word of the days that are like on my home screen. I'm getting like words emailed to me. Like I'm always taking in words. I look at things with subtitles because I have to like constantly be taking in words, because you have to like build up this like reservoir almost of like words and personas so that at any given moment, you can just like snap in. Like if you were to just be like, yo, Rayvon, like I need you to like write my bio for me. And this is what I wanted. I'm going to be able to ask you probably because I've been doing it and I've become obsessed with it. I'll be able to ask you like a set of probably like 3 to 5 questions. And then I'll just go and I'll just write it from like the perspective of you. And I didn't write it. I mean, it's not me, it's you. So it's just like, I think that's the hardest part though, because while I like to think that, oh, this is great. This sounds just like you. You may look at it and you're like, I hate it. And like 90%, I would say 95% of my days are spent with no. Like, no, this does not work. We should do this again. I don't like this. Or this doesn't work because of this. Or this is not tied to, our brand identity. Or this is not this. Or it's always something wrong with it. And then like, even when you win, the yays are still not as loud as like the no's. So it's just like constantly reminding yourself that you're in an industry where your value is constantly based on the last thing that you did. You have to constantly remind yourself that you are worth more than that. Like your last project is not what defines you like as a person. It may be what they're using as like a thing to like determine whether or not you get promoted or whether or not you're a good creative. But ultimately, I feel like that's the toughest thing because it's so subjective. You and I could sit here and argue for the next 2 days about a sentence, and you could feel very strongly about it being wrong, and I can feel very strongly about it being right. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the pecking order. And if you have a higher level than me, then ultimately your perspective wins, and that's how this industry is set up.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the toughest things. If you're not careful, it would end up it'll affect you. You'll wonder why you're sad, and you're just like, I don't think I'm good. And then you start questioning, am I good? Like when I started out, that was something I wrestled with a lot. I was just like, maybe they're right. Because you begin to like internalize it in the wrong way. You're like, you're taking it personal. You're like, maybe they're right. Like, maybe I'm not a good writer. Or maybe you started to internalize it as in you're not a good creative. When in reality, the bigger picture is these people are trying to meet a deadline. They're not looking at who wrote it or who designed this. They're just looking at the finished product and they're like, no, this is not what we're looking for. So learning to attach yourself to your work so much so that you're vulnerable and people could feel that emotion, but also as soon as you hand it off, realizing that you have to detach yourself from it because then you will feel like you are the one being attacked when it's not you being attacked all the time. It's just the work. And you have to learn how to like separate the two. So that's like the hardest thing, hands down. Something that I still work through today. Because it affected me so much when I was first starting, I try to be more empathetic and cognizant of that when I am giving creative feedback to young creatives. So I'm always like, younger creatives. I'm always trying to like walk the line of like, sometimes you need some tough love, as I'll call it. And it's like, somebody has to tell you like, this is not working and this is why it's not working, so that something can click within you to say like, I need to start thinking more strategically and I need to start thinking, and there needs to be a paradigm shift on how you're approaching the work if you keep doing it too many times. But for the most part, I try to like, my thing is using questions as a way of guiding you to like your own answer. So I'll just, instead of saying like, I hate this, I'll just keep saying like, so what do you like about this? And do you think that like understanding that like this is the brief, do you think that like answers that? Do you think someone who didn't know what you just said would get that? And normally, oftentimes they're like, no, oh, I didn't even think about that. And it's like allowing people to arrive at their own conclusions is more beneficial to me than just saying like, this is not right. Because then you'll go back and I want you to fix something and you don't even have clear understanding as to why I was wrong or why it needs to be fixed. And it's like, that doesn't help. So yeah, I went on about that a little bit because that's something that like, it's there. I don't know how we can ever get past that. But my favorite part would be the exact opposite, right? Like there's nothing like, I think seeing the joy on people's faces when they are able to see the work that I'm able to do is probably like one of my favorite things, because I oftentimes look at the finished product for everything that it could have been, because it goes through this gauntlet of like approvals, right? So it's like oftentimes you're start with this thing and this is your baby and you're just like, this is amazing. And then by the time it like goes up to approval and like back down and back up and back down, and then it's released into the world, sometimes it's completely foreign to you, for better or for worse. It's like not even close to like what the idea started as. So, sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of like, we should have used a different song, or like, oh, we should have did this alternate ending that I wanted to do, or like, oh, if they would have just did this. And it's like, I seldom say these things out loud, but it's like in my mind. But then like I hear people reacting to it and they're like, this is amazing. I am so proud of you. This is so good. And like, you've inspired me. And because I saw you do that, I want to go do this. And it's just kind of like, that makes it worth it, right? Because now you realize, okay, it's not necessarily about the work. It's about the fact that you're able to do it. Like you're here playing this game with people who we otherwise would not have been able to play with. And you are learning things and you're operating on a whole different scale now. And it's about like access and like opportunity. And those things are invaluable, right? So that's a very rewarding thing to like be able to be driving on the expressway with a friend and like, didn't you work on that? I'm like, yeah, I did. And then it's like, well, I'll be like at home and like a commercial will come on. I'm like, oh, I worked on that. And they're like, what? And then like my little cousins are like very excited to like see stuff. So that makes it worth it. Because it's a job. I tell people it's a job like anything else. So I get tired of going to work too. And I don't want to go to check, clocking in all the time either. I'm just like, but that helps put things in perspective, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think for you to be able to say to somebody, you don't know how much of me that took
Yes.
a lot from me
Yeah.
to get to where it is. And that's the whole thing. Sometimes people don't understand. It's like, but it is like it's birthing a child, or, it's hard for us, to realize that it just what it took from your spirit in order to create that.
Yes. Yes. That's so true. And it's like, that's the plight of the creative. That's the plight of not even just the creative. I feel like that's the plight of educators. That's the plight of like, when I think about the role that, like you said, we hadn't, met each other or like engaged a lot prior to this moment. But I think about like even the department and what you're doing now, even with like this and like hosting this and getting like other alums together. Like I feel like that work is incredibly important. And when I thought about the opportunity to speak with you and like what that means, I was very humbled by that, because it's like, again, this is going back to things that are invaluable. What you're doing is like showing students what students that came before them didn't get to see, really. And I think that's a way of like paying it forward, and it gets a little bit better with each generation. We're moving the needle a little bit more. And ultimately it's showing students at Western. The reason I love this, because Western is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? And it's just like, but seeing all the amazing people that are coming out is just like, you don't have to like, it's one of those things where it's just like, you could still go as far as your mind will take you. Like, and you are getting the tools here to be successful somewhere else. And, some people's level of impact and the work, they're able to carry out the work because there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Macomb. So it's just like, I just applaud like you and like the educators and the people that are there that are single-handedly on the front lines for like cultivating this next generation of thought leadership. I feel like, because if y'all stop doing y'all jobs, we're doomed. Everybody's doomed. This is like, we're just.
Well, you get it, Rayvon. It's what I want people to see when they see your picture or see this video is to say, follow him. Or if you don't want to follow him, exactly, be like him.
Yeah.
And create that path for somebody else.
Yes.
And that's what that's exactly what the intent of this is.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to ask that, and I don't know how I remember seeing all this on LinkedIn, but you had a series of photographs where you were mimicking Black historical figures in their photographs of something capturing a point in time. What inspired
Yes.
that was, first of all, that was
Yes.
awesome. How did that
Thank
come
you.
about?
Thank you. So that's my pride and joy, actually. I have that somewhere. This is this is my baby. You were talking about, like, it was from king to king. Um and pretty much, so I wanted to do something for Black History Month that was different, right? So it started with that, and I was just like, how can I like celebrate Black history, but not in a way that's like expected? Because my biggest gripe with Black History Month is that, like, we talk about the same people far and wide. It's just like there's so many other like pioneers who are like very instrumental in like doing this work to move us forward as a people. And our educational systems, the way pop culture is set up, we just keep hearing about the same people. And I think that what happens is um, it begins to, like, we fall stagnant. We begin to like devalue, almost like we're not really seeing the value in like these stories anymore, because we're hearing about them so many times. Like, we're seeing so many films and so many reinterpretations of like the same person. And it's just kind of like, dude, like, let's talk about some other things. Let's come at it from a different perspective. So that was my own brief. Like, how can I come at this from a different perspective? So then I was like, okay, I'm a Black man, so Black male perspective. Okay, I could possibly do that. Okay, what would I do though? And it was just like, oh, you could just talk about how these people have impacted you. And I was like, okay, this is like the internal monologue. I'm like, okay, if I do that, why would people want to watch it or look at it though? It's just like a lot of people see words and they're just like, no. And there's just like, so it's like, how can I write this in a way that's simple and very like social media-esque, like, modular, in the way that you could like see it, you get it immediately, and then you're out. I was like, okay, I need to do images. And I was like, should I do images of the people? And then I was like, that's cool. And then I was like, maybe I could recreate the photos, maybe. And then it just started this journey of like finding a photographer, finding a designer, and I ended up using like two of my close friends. One of my friends took all of my photos over the course of a year. Those photos were taken over the course of 1 year. Once I realized how big it was, I came up with this idea, I think in January of 2018, I think. And or it may have been, no, it was January of 19. And I wanted to do it in February of 19. And once I realized how big it was, I was just like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. So I was super discouraged, but I just decided to like, okay, I'll just spend the rest of the year getting ready for the next Black History Month. And that's what happened. So like, those pictures are like over the course of a year. So it was just like my haircut looks different, which added more character to the photos, because like my hair was looking different in some of them. Like, I was smaller in some of the pictures that were like, when we first started. But it ultimately added more levity, I feel like, to the book. And then when I had the pictures, I was like, this is really coming to life. And I was like, what am I going to call this? And someone asked me like, well, what is this to you? And I was like, well, it's like a declaration of like, these kings did this and you could do that as well. And I was like, so if someone asked me, I would just say, this is from a king, being me, to a king, being the person I'm honoring. Thank you for like, influencing me positively. And I was like, that's it. And then like my copywriter brain started going. I was like, that's it. I'm going to start every post with from king to king. And it's going to be like this. I said, everything is going to start like that. And I was like, there's my consistency. I got my visual component. I got my copy. We got it. We got it. Boom. That's it. And it just took off in a way that I did not expect, to be honest with you, because again, I come from an industry where I'm in a culture where like you hear no all the time. So like projects like this, I'm just like, this is just a passion project that I'm doing on the side to like just keep my own sanity. Like, I'm just like, I just want to do something that I have the final say so over and I can say yes. But people started reaching out to me, like these publications started reaching out to me. And I was just like, oh, wow. And then like people started reaching out to me like, oh my God, this has like encouraged my son in such a way, or like, I have to, please tell me you're making this into a book. And I was like, I guess I am. I guess so. That was never a part of the plan. I was just gonna put it on social and be done. And it was just like it was like a demand. Like you have to be making this into a book. So I did. I made it into a book. It was, like I said, it was so unexpected. I think that it's just a testament to like when you follow things that you're passionate about and you do them with excellence, with like a spirit of excellence to the best of your ability, and you put it out into the world and let it define what it's going to be. This is what happens, and it's just like it's very humbling. Like people's stories that have come to me in my inbox as a result of like getting this book, and like people have been sending me like photos with like their kids in this book, and like I was just like, this is like I've never expected any of this, but it's amazing.
Wow.
It's super amazing. I love it.
So if you haven't checked it out, make sure people listening or watching this podcast check it out. It's called From King to King, right?
Yes, From King to King. It could be you can look at it. So it's sold out. But it's on my website, which is Cuzray Said, CAUSERAYSAID. And there's like a few still shots on there that you can go and like look at the book and see like the ethos behind it. And it's still on my Instagram as well, like which is at Cuzray Said, because I don't post that often. Like that was the most often I had to post every day, and that was probably the most stressful thing about it, because I was just like, I don't even post this much, especially not pictures of myself. I'm like, but yeah, y'all can check it out. And yeah, be
That's
great.
awesome. That is awesome. Let's and I appreciate everything that you've been able, all the time that you've given us. But we always like to end with what kind of recommendations might you have for a young person trying to find out who they are?
Ooh, this is a good one. I feel like let me see. I actually took some notes on this because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. I'm like, if he asks me, um, okay. So I feel like it starts with like a mind. Your mind, like you can only go as far as you think you can go, right? And I think that like you have to have a certain level of audacity to be like successful, I feel like. And I think oftentimes we're so used to, as people, we're just used to like having our lives kind of set up for us, right? Like you go to school at this time, you eat at this time, you take classes at this time, you're on break during this time. And it's very structured. And then you get to college and it's a little bit more relaxed. And then you get into the real world and it's really just like what's really going on. And I think that you just have to know, like, you may not be able to know how, you may not see how things are going to work out, but you have to have this resolve of like, I am going to be successful. Like, even when I left Western, I still didn't know what was next. Even when I was at Western and I went through like everyday, college issues as well. There were points where I was just like, I might not come back next semester. I might not be able to come back next semester. It's just like, or how am I going to get past this? And it's just like, it's easy to in that moment look at everything like this is the end of the world. Like I had so many end of the world moments in college where I thought all of them were like, how am I ever going to get past this? And you look back and it's just like, that was nothing in comparison to like, this is like, now I'm just looking at stuff like, oh, this is like actual problems. But I think the first thing is just like having this resolve of like belief in yourself and knowing that you just having this resolve that you're going to be successful regardless of how. You just know that, right? And then just doing the work. Like you have to, I think that oftentimes the biggest thing that I've learned about networking is like a lot of us have this misconception, myself included, right? Like we had this misconception that networking is attaching yourself to somebody that's higher than you and like having them pull you up. That is not networking, right? Like true networking is like finding people who are on the same level as you, who have the same struggles as you, who are also not known, who are also just like trying to make sense of life. And you collaborate and rise together. You figure out a way that we can help each other. Like, oh, I'm a writer, you're a designer. Let's do this together. Or I'm an educator and you're creative. Let's create some sort of program, or like just leveraging each other's skill sets and not trying to do everything by yourself. Because I think in today's world, it's always just like, I'm self-made. You don't have to be. I think self-made. First of all, nobody is really self-made. This is a lie. Like, it's just not. You're not self-made. And I think that people aspire to that and to their own demise. Like, you just got to be open to like taking help and feedback from people, and being open to criticism is another thing that's like super important. Like, if you're operating in offense, and anytime someone wants to like, give you a piece of criticism or feedback, and you have an attitude with them, or you think that everyone's out to get you, you're not going to go far. Because, there's some sort of parable or something that goes like, the person who knows everything realizes they know nothing, or something like that. And it's like, that's true. Like, we're forever students of life, and we don't know everything. And somebody in the room might have a better idea than you. And that's okay. This doesn't mean that you're incompetent or like you're not good. It just means that this person had a better idea than you this time. Then you may have the better idea next time. And that's okay. Like, just keep it moving. Like, put the ego aside. And, because if people don't like to work with you, they're not going to hire you. Like, if I'm just giving you like life experience, like, if you can be very qualified, if you got like a horrible attitude, or like you coming off as like a narcissist of sorts, nobody's going to want to work with you. And it's just like, so who are you going to work with? You're going to work by yourself. If you can even do that at all. It's like, people like to enjoy who they're working with. We spend so much time together as like employees and colleagues or what have you. I would hate to like come into like a negative Nancy, or I hate putting like names. I wonder who named like negative Nancy or like bogus Bob or whatever. I wonder who like put these names. Sorry, Nancy, I'm not calling you negative. It's all the Nancy's out there, but you don't want to be like a negative person. But yeah, honestly, in short, I just feel like, just to sum that up, I guess, would be, do the work, write the vision for yourself, and do the work to make sure that it comes to pass. That was a very like scenic route to say that. Like, write the vision for yourself and do the work. Sometimes the work is networking. Sometimes the work is learning how to be more disciplined and not going out as much. And like, really, because when you say, well, you don't have the time, it's normally because your time is being put in places where it shouldn't be. So it's just kind of like, what are you doing with your time? Assess that. Like, be responsible. If you can't hold yourself accountable or keep your promises to yourself, you can't possibly expect other people to do that in this life. So these are things that I'm learning. I'm constantly reminding myself. But yeah, I hope that makes sense to them.
No, I'm sure it does. Rayvon Carter, creator, trailblazer. I think also a young man of high character.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that again. And I just want to say, you keep doing, I want you to keep doing this work. And I know sometimes when you're doing stuff like this, people don't really see the value in it until they don't have it anymore. And then I was just like, encourage you to like, I don't know, like how it's being received, or like if a lot of students are like taking it, or like even colleagues or whatever. But I think this type of work is incredibly important. And if there's anything that I could do to help you push your vision forward with this, or like, just creating pipelines or whatever, please just let me know. Because I'm very honored that you thought that I would be good for this. And this type of work that you're doing in general, though, I think is invaluable and is very necessary, especially for students at Western. Right.
Man, I appreciate that. And thanks to all those viewers out there as well. If you have somebody like Rayvon that you want to recommend, just send me an email. We want to hear from you. We hope that you continue to watch and listen to the podcast as well, and really appreciate everyone's support. So until next week, stay safe, take care, and God bless.